Hi and big hello from Croatia. I'm gonna talk today about continuous localization in enterprise web project, which is a very hot topic, and I'm also gonna talk about how we did it in Infobip. I hope that you will enjoy my session, so let me start from introducing myself. Hi, my name is Ante. I'm 27 years old, software engineer working in Infobip for the past 5 years. I'm also a Master of Science in Computing and Web Infrastructure Software Engineer. I'm also frequently involved with meetups and conferences, and I'm educator, mentor, and speaker. And I have several interests, and some of them are React, Webpack, application build, optimization, performance, web architecture, automations, and experience. And I'm also a hobby photographer, so feel free to check my Instagram if you are interested in some of my pictures. Okay, let's begin. Language today connects people, and we need to make sure that our message gets everywhere. But we have to ask ourselves, do our clients speak English? Because at average, about 50% of users do not speak or use English at all, and that is the same thing for InfoBip Web Interface, which is our main web product. Because 50% of our clients use one of the non-English languages, but also speak for the importance of translations. And we need to make sure to use a proper tool and to give clients the best possible experience. But we will always have a universal word, like for example, sauna, which is used in a lot of languages. And of course, pizza, jacuzzi, banana, taxi, kiwi, mango. But this is not enough. Only a few words. But we need to think about full applications. Anyway, for ambitious, fast-growing business, for example, the question of going global is usually a case of when, because the majority of businesses typically don't recognize the importance of translation, so there is a lot more to building a global product. So, localization is often an afterthought and something that is not explored or implemented, and we will come to the situation where localization becomes a bottleneck which can jeopardize international expansion and make it a lot more expensive and useful. But we can prevent this by actually ensuring that localization is an integral business process that is important for going global, and we need to think about how to implement it. For example, continuous localization. And remember, localization is the key to the future international business. So make sure you properly do it, especially as market researchers have shown that people respond better to content in their own language and which is in accordance with their own culture. And what I'm gonna do today, I'm gonna tell you a story about our beginnings with translations, how we got to continuous localization, and how we implemented translations inside InfoBip web interface. So let's begin. First off, we have internationalization and localization. Internationalization is when developers design the application so that they can be localized without engineering changes. And localization is the process of actually adapting your application for different languages or locales. And here's when translators come in with translation and everything. And I will mention it locale. And can think of locale like an identifier and that finding views on language or region. For example, in English US or Spanish Latin America and similar. And usually here you'll be able to use different integrations like for example i18x or your own. And for localization, be aware that translators will focus on translating the message of your content for international readers so that everyone can get it. And all of this also goes beyond design because we need to properly prepare design and layout to show correctly in all languages. And to achieve all of this, we also use a cloud-based translation management system, which I will call TMS in the next slide. But before we begin, I want to assume that our solution is called IBI89 and that we have two very crucial commands. First one is build, where we pull the phrases and translations and generate translation files. And the second command is scan, where we scan the project to detect the phases and then we push them to translation management system to have them translated. So they are crucial and important. So when we have that, we need to also think about how to approach translation. And we are going to check some of the three translation management strategies, such as Waterfall or Agile or Continuous Localization, and we are going to see what are some good and bad sides. So let's do that. When we have waterfall localization, we have linear process which is like waterfall, and when we get to localization, we actually have everything prepared and we have a pretty big chunk of the text that actually needs to be translated, and that is only up to development. This generally blocks the text changes and will delay the release until everything is ready, but it is also, how I say, kind of very tedious to prepare breaking text into the string because that is very hard for bit application. All of this generally feels very manual and it is prone to errors, and it can also be hard to track the progress on translator side. So this is not what we want. And in Agile localization, we will simply add localization inside every sprint. And this will have the smaller amount of the boxes that need to be translated, and it will be done in time with development in each sprint, but it is also not what we want because it is maybe more frequent and in time with development, but it will also require the teams to add some sort of automation because Agile will ensure automations out of the box only for translators to translation management system. But when you think about translators, the one additional problem is that they don't know our development environment. From their side, this is higher frequency, more frequent updates they need to do without context, but with smaller boxes, smaller volumes of text. And deadlines are much smaller, so there is a larger margin for errors. And with continuous localization, this is the most effective one in ever-changing market because we want now localization automated and seamless. And teams should be able to deliver the product that is ready for release without waiting for translation changes, and they should just move on after that because we will have a never-ending translation job that is fully integrated into continuous delivery workflow. So let's also mention some survey data. So here you will see that we have a pretty big amount of percentage, like 67%, which means that those companies either don't use anything or they use Excel and Google spreadsheet. And for example, in InfoPip, we started from internally built tools and then we moved to translation management system, Cloud One. Let's see how we started in InfoPip. So you can see that we have projects and we have all translation management system. And in between we have full translation, abracadabra, magic mumbo jumbo, which handles everything, including pulling and pushing the translations. Sadly, we depend on installing everything as an NPM package, which means that we don't have anything unified. Translation depends on application builds, and the biggest problem is we need to redeploy on every change and wait for every app to wait. Imagine 50 applications and you have to wait for days, and that is blah. Yeah. No. Yeah. So let's complicate, because do we need to complicate? No. So we will simplify it and we will move to cloud-based solution, automated translations, and let's mention some of the most common features. So first we have translation memory, where once we translate some phrase, it is saved in some sort of database, and when we have the same phrase, we can simply reuse already translated phrase to speed up the localization process. Then we have machine translations, like for example Google Translate, and most of cloud systems also have it, and even though it is not perfect, it can be used to get some sort of head start. And then you can also hire translation agencies or freelance translators which can then do the localization, and since we have translation management system, this is much easier. And also we cannot have automation without some sort of powerful API. So this is also something which is quite easier with translation management system because they have them out of the box and on the cloud. And let's also explore what we have with the UI. Generally, we will have one project per language, and you will see here that we have Portuguese, German, Spanish, etc., etc. When we have new phrases, we have a system which says we want it to this, and that language, and we usually add it to every language. So let's now go into one of these projects and check what we have. And when we check one project, for example, we can see some basic information like source, subject, yada 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 yada. And we can see that at the bottom we have documents. One document will equal one Node.js project and it should be localized. So we will go into one document and let's check what we have there. And when we check, for example, a single document, we can see that we have source where you can see the phrases, and under target we can translate them either by ourselves or through translation memory. And then we also have some details like number of words at the top, and at the bottom we can add some comments, some details, something that can help to translators, or we can even check some additional statistics if it's necessary. And let's also explore the implementation. We have, for example, our build tools, which you can assume is called IBI89 tools. And we have 4 different versions and it all has npm packages. What is very, very wrong. Okay, so let's then extract and unify it somehow. So luckily, thanks to Node.js, we can actually use the npx command, which means that we don't have to install the dependency. So we can also see that we have extracted some of the common commands like scan and build to our Jenkins plugin, where we have also specified a single version. So by having everything in one place is awesome, but what can happen if we are missing some commands? Also, we have to build project one by one again, and that is so we need to also improve this somehow because that is not good. So let's improve this by making our translations independent and instant. So we will take text interfaces and we will simply extract it to its own independent Jenkins job. And we call it a part of the application, and then we have it at its own and one step less in the build, what is awesome. So we can do this for build as well. So let's do it. We'll do again the same thing where we will take build job, extract it outside from the project, and we will generate a Jenkins job. Or both scan and build will run once a day, each one of them, while build will generate translation files if we put them to CDN, and then webs will be able to download them and easily use them. And woohoo! We really managed to extract everything. So let's see what does all of this mean. What do we get with this? Well, first we have instant translation updates everywhere at the same time, and those jobs are independent, unified, consistent, and automatic under its workflow, which means that teams don't need to know all details. And there are no blockers anymore, and we can basically move toward continuous localization also like how we want to. And also, as we have scan and build jobs separate, that means that we have translations as some sort of independent application plugin. And we are calling this decompose I89 because it doesn't depend on any other application. We update it by itself by using scan and build job, where each one of them is run once a day. And for build job, we also save all the translation files on CDN from where webs can then pull it and use it. So let's also see what we get with decompose I89. First, we are not borrowing through that anymore. We control release and deploy request and repeating like parent. Deploy this, deploy that, blah 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 blah. So we are able to ensure that we have translation covered by making sure everything is initialized and ready, and also the code is simpler. So we ensure that writing translations and ensuring them is easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Yeah. And let's also see a couple more things and what else can be useful in the translation process. So the most important ones for us are translation coverage and English phrase verification, because we need to also ensure that we can detect the phrase, because otherwise we won't be able to do anything or fix or localize anything. And generally for English verification, we have a UX writer who will review the web interface and will see if anything needs to be fixed, and if anything is necessary, then they will add in other target. And when we run the scan job, like we do here, it will check if anything was fixed or replaced, and it will generate any necessary pull request, which will then be sent to necessary teams. And when we talk about translation coverage, we need to ensure that we have 100% translation coverage together with automated coverage validation. Because we may prepare everything for localization, but that doesn't mean that it will be localized for sure. So to help with this, we are preparing automated validation and fake language. So let's check them out. And we basically, for fake language, we retrieve phrases and generate that fake language, which you can recognize by this dot. So if we have no dots, that means that that phrase will not be localized, and that is the problem, which we need to fix, of course. And we also have something to help us out. One internal language toolbox, which allows us to quickly change the language so that we can verify if everything is okay with translations. And then, when we talk about coverage validation, we talk about two parts. A state trees, which we use for code-based check and automatic updates, and UI testing, which we use for the tools like Cypress, Puppeteer, for a little bit more concrete coverage testing. So both are awesome for automation, and AST trees have a lot of problems with false positives, but with UI testing, we don't have those problems, and we can even use screenshots. They have a lot of available plugins, but one problem is that depending on how you have set up translations, it can be quite complex to integrate into your product. So you need to be careful. And why did I mention screenshots? Because sometimes we will have a different phrase which will look very similar, and it can have, say, confusing context because it cannot be clear on the first to what it needs to be translated. And because of that, we have screenshot support, where for each phrase we take a screenshot showing that phrase in the application, and we upload it together with it. So that significantly helps translators, as they can actually understand the context much easier. And lastly, imagine that we have phrases from backend. And now, in order to localize them, we have to basically hardcode them, and this is not good, especially in multiple projects, and if we need to update it everywhere, because no. So, to avoid that, we are working on setting up server-side translation, which uses an awesome open source tool called Surge, and it's also good that it works with a lot of different integration and systems. And this is basically what I wanted to say, so let's sum up at the end. Basically, overall, what we want is translation to be seamless and automated so that developers don't have to worry about translations once they integrate them. And we should have no limits in how to write code, as we shouldn't have any blockers because of implementation data. And also make sure that everything is continuously improved, because if don't implement translations only once and then ignore them for years. From our experience, that happened to us, and we saw how much harder it was to actually update everything, and it was a struggle. So, as everything else is evolving, ensure that translations are evolving as well, so keep them up to date and work on constantly improving them. Thank you all for listening to me. I hope that you like my session, and if looking forward to your questions, and if anyone wants to contact me further, reach out to me on email or on React Finland Slack, or just ping me over one of the channels that is available.
Thank you so much for your talk. We have one question. That is that how is your tool able to detect new phrases and remove duplicates? You did mention the part about the context that the phrase is used in, but is there any more like detail you can also go into that?
Well, yes, I can mention a few. So when we have, for example, our tool that we use, when we have new phrases, we detect them per project level. So that will mean that the phrase can be duplicated, but if it is duplicated inside one project, those translation manifest tools are usually smart to detect it because they usually assign, let's say, some sort of unique ID. So based on that unique ID, we can know which phrase is for what. And translations usually have one option, which is something called namespaces. So imagine, for example, that you have, let's say, React Finland page, and you have header at the top, and you have at the bottom, and you have in between. So if you on the same page, for example, want to uh, identify different parts where you have the same phrase that possibly has a different context, you can set up some namespace, which is like some descriptive word or something similar. So with duplicates, we remove them only if it is inside the same project and it is inside the same namespace. So, and regarding the context, yes, we have screenshot support, which we are actually currently working on implementing, but if we have, for example, some sort of automated UI testing tool integrated with translations, it is possible to take a screenshot, and each one of these tools actually supports adding some sort of, how to say, some sort of attachments. And we already add, for example, the location in the code, but we also are starting to add a screenshot as well. So at the moment, we have to do it like this, but as soon as we manage to fully integrate screenshots, that will be the way that we will go with.
Awesome. I hope that answers your question. Someone is asking that a lot of sometimes they would like to suggest better translations for apps, but only a very few amount of apps have crowdsourcing possibilities. Do you have any ideas on this? How do you see the future when it comes to crowdsourcing translations?
Well, regarding crowdsourcing translation, we have to basically think about, we mean how to say submitting data, right? So that I'm clear here,
What? Sorry, a
right?
mitigator?
No, we crowdsourcing. I mean, we probably mean how to say having multiple users, obtaining some suggested
Yeah.
translation.
Like for example, imagine the React website, and I go there and I'm like, this does not mean what do you think it means in Portuguese, and I try to update it, but there's nothing for me to update. Like there's no
Uh huh.
crowdsourcing thing. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
for example, we are using the solutions like translation agencies or freelance translators, and usually before we give a green light to translator, we get opinion from someone else. There is one useful option where you can actually go with, let's say, multi-stage translation. So first you get the translation, then someone needs to review it and confirm that it is okay, and then we usually need to testing, for example, in our testing environment, make sure that everything is working, and especially ensure the translation coverage. So in the future, I think that everyone will start moving more towards those cloud-based tools, but that it would be possible to use someone from the translator's market to know. Either someone can possibly suggest a better phrase. We are actually discussing possibly adding some sort of feedback form for translation. So if someone
Yeah.
sees something that possibly has a wrong context, they can actually make a suggestion, and
Yeah.
then we can view it and we can check about fixing it. So I would say if we want to implement crowdsourcing in some sort, the good beginning stage would definitely be using feedback form and trying to use someone from the translators market. So usually, they charge, I think, probably at the amount of words and that, but it can definitely be some good first step forward, in my opinion. I would say.
Yeah. I have one very fast question. Does your translation service handle left to right and right to left? Like switching the.
Uh, we
Yeah,
actually do
that's.
have Arabic language support, but we had it with the original translation system. Now we are working on
Mhm.
adding it to our cloud-based system. It is actually not so simple because we have tools like we have some new tools inside our web interface, so it can be tricky to figure out. So when we work on left to right or right to right languages, the best suggestion for moving forward is to, I don't know, either hire designers or working designers
Yeah.
to ensure that this is rendered correctly, because
Yeah.
it can be something very, very tricky. We, for example,
Yeah.
currently have some issues with Arabic, but we are working on it. We are aware of it, and I'm sure we will get it done and ready in no time. So my suggestion is to approach like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much.